ready to do your wake. Pero ¿cuál es el problema si no miramos a terminar? El problema es que la sobre
All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Subrecipient Training Series Part 2, Preparing for a Monitoring Review and Documenting Compliance, hosted by the California Department of Housing and Community Development. Next slide, please. This webinar is designed to permit interaction between ACD and its subrecipients. Please post questions in the chat. ACD will try to respond within the chat feature and will also pause to answer questions at a specified time. Otherwise, participants will be in listen-only mode. So for any technical issues, you may also request assistance using the chat feature. This session will be recorded and materials will be posted in the HCD website for future reference and training. See our resource webpage located at the end of the webinar. Next slide, please. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Sergio Portella with HCD, along with my team members, Wendy Nelson, Simona Akhtar, Michelle Chand, along with Civics, Adrian Duncan, Angie Trail, Jared Lee, Patty Weisner, Philip Petito, Randall Mullen, and Patrick Roberts. Next slide, please. Today, our agenda is going to be going over our goals and objectives, monitoring considerations, the monitoring engagement process, documenting compliance and record keeping, document coordination walkthrough in the system of record, which is Grants Network, and we'll finish with the Q&A session. Next slide. I'm going to send it off to Randall for day one goals and objectives.
Okay, thank you, Sergio. What goals and objectives has HCD set for day one of this two-day webinar? As you see on this slide, we hope that subrecipients will gain a better understanding in three respects. The first is understanding the monitoring engagement process with an emphasis on the word of engagement, engaging the grantee's activities with those of its subrecipients, and particularly focus on the subrecipient's role during a monitoring review. The second is to help you better understand the expectations for documenting your conformance to HCD and federal standards, particularly during the review of a monitoring engagement. We'll pay particular attention to those elements of documentation that will relate to the upcoming topic for monitoring. And then the third objective is to help you understand how Grants Network or Zengen will be used as a record keeping and document collection tool for the monitoring reviews. Now, you do see a note at the bottom of this slide. We will not be attempting in day one to cover the why, that is the regulatory basis for compliance, nor explain at a deeper level how to document compliance. Both of those elements will be addressed in day two of this two-day webinar series. I'll now pass the presentation off to Patrick, who will cover monitoring considerations. Patrick?
Thank you, Randall. Good morning, everyone. Wanted to step through some of just some things to keep in mind as we step through the monitoring process. First, wanted to bring back a connection to the previous training that we had that talked about the responsibilities of subrecipients. Subrecipients are responsible to carry out specified programs on behalf of HCD, comply with all federal statutes, regulations, and program requirements, such as financial management, labor standards, Section 3, minority and women-owned business enterprises, and others. They're responsible to meet all established performance goals and milestones, performance metrics as stated in applicable contracts, and comply with all terms and conditions of the Master Standard Agreement or Standard Agreement, including which records to maintain and reports to submit. Ultimately, the grantee, in this case HCD, is responsible for subrecipients' compliance and performance. The monitoring engagement should be looked at and viewed as a partnership process. HUD grantees are charged with making sure their subrecipients comply with all regulations governing their administrative, financial, and programmatic operations, and HCD has a vested interest in assisting its subrecipients to achieve their performance objectives on schedule and within budget. The monitoring engagement, continuing that idea of partnership, the monitoring engagement, whether it's on-site or off-site, should be viewed, or is viewed, excuse me, as a specific period in time of a project. Think of it as a snapshot. Questions and additional documentation requests are not intended to catch you outside the scope of the review. Additional information requests might be necessary to get a clear picture of a more accurate determination. Monitoring should not be viewed as a gotcha type activity. This is the time for the subrecipients and HCD to review project and grant compliance status, and when necessary, discuss course corrections to come back into compliance. Effective monitoring depends on a mutual commitment to identify and solve problems to improve the delivery of the disaster recovery benefits. Monitoring engagements can be either on-site monitoring or desk monitoring. The on-site monitoring is a formal monitoring engagement that takes place at the subrecipient's office, in which an in-depth review of program or project activities are reviewed for compliance. The desk monitoring is an off-site, less formal monitoring engagement that is conducted at the HCD office. The subrecipient would still submit requested documents to HCD monitoring staff prior to the start date of the engagement. You'll see the note there at the bottom, regardless of the monitoring type, the main steps that we're going to step through during this training are the same throughout the monitoring process. What to keep in mind. Initial monitoring conclusions are draft findings and/or recommendations. The subrecipient will have the opportunity to review the draft report for inaccuracies and any points of disagreement. The subrecipient can provide the basis of any objection during 2 stages of the monitoring engagement process prior to the monitoring report letter being finalized, and that monitoring report letter will be discussed later on in the training. Those 2 stages are the exit conference and the weeks after the monitoring engagement. The subrecipient can provide sufficient documentation and data to support the belief that the preliminary assessment is inaccurate and to support clearing the monitoring conclusions. And now I'll pass it over to Patty, who will take us through some of the monitoring engagement process.
Thank you, Patrick. As Patrick stated earlier, the monitoring engagement process is a collaborative effort. So here we see the process map with the monitoring schedule is created, the pre-communication with subrecipients to coordinate notification letter information is done 45 days prior to monitoring. The monitoring notification letter is sent to subrecipients. Either at pre-communication or at monitoring notification letter, it's recommended that subrecipients do a monitoring preparation while HCD is also doing its monitoring preparations. Within 30 days from the date of the notification letter, the monitoring event is conducted. 30 days after the exit conference, 30 days after the exit conference, you will get a monitoring report letter, which will be covered later. You'll have 30 days from the date of the letter to send in your response to the report. And once all issues are cleared, the monitoring engagement will be officially closed. Next slide. So right now we're going to go over the 3 components and the subcomponents that make up each one. The first component, of course, is pre-monitoring. Next slide. Pre-monitoring is composed of the quarterly monitoring schedule, the pre-monitoring communication, as stated before, that's a collaboration and coordination so that subrecipients and HCD know what days and timeframes work for each party. After the pre-monitoring communication, a notification letter will be sent out. Next slide. So the monitoring schedule. In order to ensure subrecipients are properly carrying out activities, HCD must have an oversight mechanism in place to track progress and monitor performance. HCD determines a level of risk associated with each subrecipient through a risk assessment, reviewing such criteria as knowledge of program requirements and federal cross-cutting requirements, size and complexity of the program, and financial management indicators. Next slide. HCD uses the results of the risk assessment to develop any required training and/or technical assistance or identify subrecipient monitoring need and frequency. HCD monitors will contact subrecipients prior to the scheduled month for monitoring in order to coordinate specific monitoring engagement dates and logistics. First contact between HCD monitoring staff and the subrecipient will be in the pre-monitoring communications. The communication goals is for HCD and subrecipient to determine dates and times which work for both parties. Discussion of any logistics, which can include the need for the HCD monitors to be in a separate room from subrecipient staff and/or consultants, technology needs, parking, system access, and the like. Subrecipients should expect to receive the monitoring notification letter within 2 weeks of initial contact. The monitoring notification letter officially informs the subrecipient of the monitoring engagement specifics, the when, the start date, start time, and end date, the who, HCD team members who will be a part of the monitoring event, the what, programs, projects, and/or specific areas of review, and the where, whether it's remote monitoring or on-site. HCD monitoring staff will also provide a document request to conduct a pre-monitoring review. This supports HCD in determining additional needs, specialized questions, and preparing prior to the official monitoring event. During this time, subrecipients should consider level, frequency of communication needs required throughout the event, and start ensuring that HCD monitoring staff have sufficient access to internal systems. And once again, you need to test access again to ensure a smooth access to systems for HCD monitors. Next slide. So next, we're going to cover the actual monitoring events. So the monitoring event is comprised of 3 different activities: the entrance conference, the monitoring review, and the exit conference. The entrance conference is an introductory meeting for the monitoring team and subrecipients. It provides a high-level overview of the monitoring process and the monitoring scope for each day. This is also the time when preliminary interviews are conducted. Subrecipients should provide project highlights to include program performance and milestone successes and expenditure progress. Any additional clarification or information on the monitoring focus. So the monitoring review, this will be comprised of a file review, an interview, and document request. So during the file review, monitoring teams will request documents related to the focus areas covered in the monitoring notification letter. The subrecipient should focus its prep on the files and support documentation related to those areas. During the interviews, subrecipient staff must be available to HCD and provide timely responses. So what should you do when asked questions? Questions are to understand how grants and projects are managed. Ask for clarification on items if necessary. If you're asked a question and you don't completely understand, please ask for clarification so that you provide the monitoring team with the exact information necessary. It is okay to say you need additional time to research the question to get the answer. And it is important to remember to only provide information that is requested or asked. If the monitors need additional clarification, they will ask. Next slide. The exit conference has 4 main objectives: to present the preliminary results of the monitoring event, to provide the subrecipients the opportunity to correct any misconceptions or misunderstandings identified by the monitoring team, to secure any additional information from the subrecipient, or to clarify and support their position. For any deficiencies the subrecipient agrees with, it is to provide an opportunity for subrecipient staffs to report on steps they are already taking to correct the matter. Once the exit conference has concluded, both the subrecipient and the monitor must sign the exit conference agenda with a provided copy to both parties. The signing confirms the shared understanding of all areas discussed and to record any requested information that may result in corrective actions. If remote, the agenda will be sent via email. If on site, the notes in the request will be prepared during the meeting and all parties will sign the documents. Next slide. So continuing with the exit conference does not signal the end of the monitoring. Issues addressed in the exit conference are preliminary only and should not be taken as an all-inclusive list. A monitoring view is not complete until the monitoring report letter is sent to the subrecipient, which contains the official and finalized findings, concerns, and observations. HCD monitoring staff may identify and address additional issues within the monitoring report letter which were not established during the exit conference. Post-monitoring events. So the post-monitoring process is comprised of preliminary response, monitoring report and letter, subrecipient's response, and corrective action complete letter. The preliminary response is usually provided the week after the monitoring engagement has concluded. This is where the subrecipient can provide additional information and documentation requested by HCD to address any issues identified during the exit conference. Subrecipients can also provide information after the first week of the post-monitoring phase, depending on the monitoring report letter draft completion timeframe. HCD monitoring staff may or may not identify the additional information in the monitoring report letter, which was provided after the 1-week window. The subrecipient may also submit questions to HCD monitoring staff. Next slide. Monitoring report and letter. The official monitoring report details findings, concerns, and areas of observations. The report will detail where issues were identified and/or observed depending on issue type. Report provides actions needed to resolve the issue and what needs to be done to avoid repeating the issue. The report provides a due date for the subrecipient to provide required corrective actions and/or response. And in some cases, the subrecipient may request an extension if necessary. But that request must be submitted as soon as the subrecipient has determined an extension is necessary. HCD will review the request and determine whether an extension is warranted. So what is the monitoring report letter process? The monitoring report letter is sent to the subrecipient 30 days after the exit conference. Subrecipients have 30 days with which to respond to the letter. The monitoring staff will make determinations if the subrecipient's response fully clears the issue. If the corrective action is complete, the subrecipient will receive a corrective action complete letter, and the monitoring engagement will be closed. If the monitoring staff determines that the actions are not fully cleared, corrective actions are deemed insufficient, the subrecipient will receive a corrective action incomplete letter with another set of corrective actions and/or responses required. And that process will continue until monitoring staff determines if actions are fully cleared. Next slide. So the monitoring report letter can have 3 results. It can have a result of no findings or concerns. It could have a result of findings or concerns. Examples will be provided in the financial monitoring section. The monitoring report letter, corrective actions. Corrective actions taken by the subrecipient, which corrects identified deficiencies, addresses a concern, or otherwise produces recommended improvements. Examples to be provided under the financial monitoring section in day 2. The subrecipient response letter addresses corrective actions, provides assurances, and provides required documentation. The monitoring report corrective action complete letter. Its monitoring staff have determined all corrective actions have been performed, officially closes the monitoring engagements, and subrecipients must maintain the resolution in their records. Now we're going to hand it off to Phil.
Thanks, Patty. Hello, everyone. I will be taking you through the documenting compliance and record keeping portion of this training. So let's first start off by walking through some key pointers on how best to document compliance. To frame this slide a little better, a good question that you may want to pose to yourself is, as a subrecipient, what actions fall within your scope of duties when it comes to compliance documenting? So first, demonstrating that each activity undertaken meets one of the national objectives, establishing a standard reporting framework, proving you are meeting contract goals, validating an expense, providing evidence of follow-up actions taken to correct areas of non-compliance, supporting documentation for a draw request, and ensuring that the documentation in the files relating to the project supports the funding requirements as laid out by the grantee. Next slide. So with those key tenets in mind, why is it so important to be consistent in doing them? This slide will more or less give you a general idea of why. And first and foremost, monitoring considerations should not begin with a monitoring letter. It should have a place in your daily documentation process. Accurate record keeping is crucial for the successful management of your CDBG funded activities. It is essential for tracking your performance against your contract goals and allows your grantee to provide management support in its oversight of your activities. Failure to document your CDBG funded activities adequately will undermine the success of your projects, leading to monitoring findings that are much more difficult to resolve when records are missing, inaccurate, or otherwise deficient. And lastly, your ability to readily document compliance will depend on the strength of your record keeping processes. Next slide. So as that last bullet touched upon in the previous slide, the successful establishment and upkeep of your record keeping processes will dictate your success in compliance documenting. And here's some key questions to ask yourself. Do you have a clearly defined process for acquiring, organizing, storing, retrieving, and reporting information about your CDBG funded activities? Do you have someone designated to be responsible for most of the record keeping and reporting tasks? And are those people properly trained and supported? Can you streamline your record keeping and reporting procedures by standardizing your process to eliminate duplicate records? And these three questions are more or less going to be some very key questions to keep in mind when you're doing your record keeping. So as we move along here, it's important to remain cognizant of the three main areas to which you will be required to establish and maintain accurate record keeping in. So those areas, of course, being general administration, financial management, project or activity files. So in the next couple of slides, we'll list out some key documents for each of these three areas, which you'll certainly want to keep a close eye on. So when it comes to your general administrative documentation, you want to be sure to keep track of your executed master standard agreement or standard agreement, the description, geographic location, and budget of each activity, eligibility and national objective determinations for each activity, all personnel files, citizen participation compliance documentation, fair housing and equal opportunity records, your environmental review records, and of course, documentation of compliance with cross-cutting requirements such as Davis-Bacon, URA, and lead-based payment. For financial management, you definitely want to keep track of your chart of accounts, accounting procedures, accounting journals and ledgers, source documentation, including purchase orders and invoices, procurement files, real property inventory, bank account records, including revolving loan fund records, if applicable, payroll records and reports, financial reports, audit files, and relevant financial correspondence. And lastly, the third area, project and activity records, eligibility of the activity. So for DR, disaster tieback, for mitigation, relevant mitigation measures, evidence of having met national objectives, any bids or contracts, characteristics and location of the beneficiaries, compliance with special program requirements, project budget and expenditure information, and lastly, progress and status of the project activity. So all of those aforementioned documents will of course be used for record keeping, reporting, and program management, all of which will pretty much feed into each other. Your reporting will paint the picture as to how well your program is being managed, with your record keeping being the main go-to source in your reporting. And as an important note, we will round out today's training with a tutorial on the grants management system, which will be critical to record keeping and all of its processes. Next slide. So record keeping, what, when, and how. It's important to note that your record keeping policy should include documentation plans on what needs to be collected to reflect the project and program history. It should support incurred costs during the life of the program, record when decisions were made, how those decisions were carried out during a project and/or program. And lastly, your record keeping policy should cover record retention requirements for both you as the subrecipient as well as HCD. Do note that it is absolutely imperative to keep the lines of communication open with HCD should you have any concerns regarding being compliant with any document and reporting requirements. Next slide. So as mentioned, your record keeping will be directly reflected in your reporting, and therefore your reporting procedures should be outlined in the subrecipient's policies and procedures, must comply with HCD and HUD reporting requirements and timeframes. And for this point, do keep in mind that reporting requirements are listed in your standard agreement and timeframes are listed in the responsibilities and roles and responsibilities training located on the HCD website. So moving down the list here, your reporting should always maintain the required documentation to support efforts or data in the reports. And lastly, when it comes to accessing your records, subrecipients are required to provide HCD staff with sufficient access to records, with this topic to be covered in further detail later on. Next slide. To round out this documentation and record keeping portion of the training today, this table will just quickly run down the key differences between DR and mitigation as they pertain to compliance requirements. So with regard to expenditure rates, DR requires 100% of funds to be expended in 6 years, while mitigation requires 50% expended within 6 years and 100% within 12. For overall benefit, DR has a 70% threshold requirement for low to moderate income with a 50% threshold for mitigation. For benefit to HUD's most impacted and distressed areas, DR requires for at least 80% of allocation to be spent toward mid areas. For mitigation, 50%. National objective for both DR and mitigation allow for activity funding for both LMI and urgent need. However, DR also allows for activity funding going toward the elimination of slum and blight. Moving down, DR requires a connected tieback to the wildfires, while mitigation does not. DR has no citizen advisory committee requirement, while mitigation must have a committee meeting twice a year at minimum. And lastly, DR has no mitigation requirement, while mitigation programs obviously are required to do just that in strengthening resilience to future disasters and reducing or eliminating long-term risks. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Jay with eCivis, who will provide a walkthrough of Grants Network.
I'm going to go ahead and start this section out, Phil. Hi, my name is Jarrett Lee, part of the civics team. And I'll just maybe do a quick intro before we go ahead and get to that, that particular walkthrough in the system of record. Okay, as it relates to Grants Network and its functionality, Grants Network is HCD's grants management system. As part of subrecipient requirements, HCD requires subrecipients to maintain supporting documentation for all data entered and submitted within Grants Network, including activity delivery expenditures, administration expenditures, and all expenditures of CDBG DR MIT program expenditures and program income. Subrecipients are also required to maintain their records, copies of all financial reports, and we'll kind of talk a little bit about what that means in a second, and full supporting documentation to substantiate each financial report. So really, Grants Network will serve as one, a document repository, two, a performance reporting mechanism on requirements such as Section 3, meeting performance measures, and ensuring completed projects meet the intended national objective. And three, it serves as a transparent form of oversight for HCD and subrecipients to communicate. In that vein, the HCD monitoring staff will hope to utilize this tool to ensure successful completion of monitoring reviews. So we have Jay De La Rosa here, a representative with eCivis, who will help us walk through the Grants Network system, which is the system of record. And that Grants Network system's functionality will be described in two distinct parts here through this walkthrough. So I just want to go ahead and intro that real quick before handing that off to Jay. So in that sense, the Grants Network system that we'll be walking through today will be a pre-monitoring review process of collecting documents which are not yet located or have been updated within the Grants Network system. This will be explored by the HCD monitoring staff's use of miscellaneous tasks. So we'll go ahead and we'll discuss financial management documents in more detail in day 2 of the training. Sorry about that. The second part is reviewing financial reports. Financial reports are known as draw requests packets. So invoices, supporting documentation submitted to program staff for DR and MIT reimbursement. As part of the monitoring review, the HCD monitoring staff will grab these documents from within the Grants Network system to help answer questions for the monitoring as it relates to financial management. So as I hand the walk off to Jay, it's important to reiterate and to note again that the term financial reports that we're using here through this walkthrough is used during this portion to reference either a reimbursement request package, which you as the subrecipient submit for payment, which includes invoices and supporting documents to justify costs under those invoices, or a subrecipient's accounting staff reports, for example, general ledgers, disbursements, and receipt journals. For the purposes of this grants network demonstration, the term financial report is used solely as the reimbursement request package or draw request you would submit to HCD for payment. We will discuss financial management documents in more detail in day 2 of that training. So with that, I'll hand it off to Jay. Jay?
Thank you, Jared. I appreciate that. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. And if someone can confirm that they can see it, it would be greatly appreciated.
You are good, Jay.
Thank you so much. All right. So first things first, whenever you log into your portal, you are going to log in through your normal means. So if you have gone through the portal login button, you are going to utilize that portal login button. And if you have used the grants login button in the past, you are going to use that. So we'll go ahead and log in. There you'll go to My Awards and then look for your award in question. So we're going to go ahead and pull this up. So this is the way your information should look. So we will go ahead and go to this actions column, click on the button and click on Manage Award. From here, you'll be able to see your award dashboard and a lot of information about your respective award. But what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and scroll down immediately to our pending tasks section. What I suggest you do is go ahead and just pull this up to 100 so you can make sure that you see all of your tasks. The next step is we will click on this column that says task type, and it'll list it in an alphabetical manner. And if you click it one more time, we'll see that it puts our monitoring and compliance miscellaneous task at the top. So you can also see some more information. We can see the date it was created, the due date as well. So whenever we're ready to access this task, we'll go to our actions column and click on our little box with the 3 horizontal lines and create our response. Within our miscellaneous task, and this one is directly related to monitoring and compliance, the on-site monitoring and document request, we can see at the bottom that HCD has provided us a note and action items. So these include the following documents as part of the pre-monitoring review on the topic of financial management, and then they tell us which documents to upload. So the next steps would be for you to create a response to this task. So we're just going to go ahead and copy paste. And then they're asking for these documents. So what we'll do next is we'll continue to scroll down. We'll see the ability to upload our files, and we will just go ahead and click on that option. And we will access those files that they requested. So you can drag and drop and select multiple ones at a time, so you don't have to do it at a singular moment. And once we have a green check on all of those items, we know that those files have been uploaded correctly. And you can also verify that as well. So once you have all of your files entered in your miscellaneous task and the appropriate response, you can go ahead and submit that task. You will receive a warning to make sure that this is in fact the action that you want to take. You will hit OK. And then what happens next is you want to scroll down and get away from your pending tasks to our award activities. So what we're seeing right here are 3 different miscellaneous tasks that had requests for monitoring and compliance information. Now, we can also see the various status of each item as well. So we've already submitted 1 miscellaneous task and it has been approved. So that means I can go in there and view that item. We have another task that has been submitted and HCD returned it to us and had some changes that were requested on that task. So maybe you missed a document or maybe you missed some information. So this is why they sent it back to you, and you have that ability to review it and resubmit it. And then the last one, which we just submitted, is this one that is in a pending approval. So this means that you have completed your task response, submitted it to HCD, and now they are just waiting to review and approve this task. So these are the 3 different stages that you can see for your miscellaneous tasks. Now, earlier, Jared also pointed out that you will also see your financial reports. So when you submit a financial report, there are various stages that you will see these items in as well. Additionally, you have a little bit more information on a financial report compared to your miscellaneous tasks. So we can see that we have the reporting period for that financial report, who it was created by, and that date. But then over here on our status, we can see that we have various stages. So a financial report that is in draft status is a financial report that you have created and started working on, but have not submitted it. That's why you have the ability to edit it or delete it. If a financial report has been submitted to HCD, but they have not yet approved it or reviewed it, it will stay in this status as pending approval. In fact, HCD has made at least all of the approval processes and it's sitting there waiting for the warrants to be issued. This is the other stage that you will see. It's gone through its approval process and now it's just awaiting that final payment. There are two other ones for financial reports. So this changes requested is very similar to the changes requested for miscellaneous tasks. That just means that they reviewed that financial report. It's missing some supporting documentation or some data. So they sent it back to you so you can review it and then resubmit it. And then the last stage for all the financial reports that we want to get to is approved and paid. This means it's gone through its full approval process and they have issued that warrant. And then now this report is in a view only mode. So those are the main things that you're going to want to focus on. And this does have a chronological flow on your page, so you can just continue to scroll down. With that, I will go ahead and turn this back to Jared so they can continue with the rest of this session for you all.
All right, thank you, Jay. Appreciate that. So we are rolling right along through this presentation. So we're at our stopping point for day one. So we'll go ahead and discuss maybe a little bit of the takeaways here, and then certainly open it up for a question and answer session. So there looks like there's a couple of questions that are coming through right now as I speak. So in looking at some of the key topics we covered today, we would like to stress that this is truly a partnership when ensuring compliance. Some of the steps we've discussed, which allows a subrecipient to provide feedback before, during, and after a monitoring, is by no accident. This is a process where you as the subrecipient should feel like HCD is providing guidance towards and supporting your compliance efforts in program implementation through both monitoring and technical assistance activities. This is one of the central themes of HCD's monitoring approach. We also discussed the types of monitoring and what takes place during the 3 phases of the monitoring engagement. While the type of monitoring might be determined through an HCD assessment of risk for noncompliance, the monitoring review process itself is meant for subrecipients to ask questions and approach HCD monitoring staff with feedback at any phase of the monitoring, whether that's during pre-monitoring communication, monitoring conference and interviews, or post-monitoring results discussions. Which leads to the final takeaway. Good communication and planning will only ensure a successful monitoring review to a certain point. A subrecipient's role in record keeping, reporting, and having documents readily accessible for review is the other half of that. And those practices start at the beginning of program implementation and well before monitoring occurs. So HCD is working to develop these tools and resources, as Jay went over, to coordinate and collaborate with subrecipients within grants network. While parts or pieces of the monitoring review process might change from year to year, the idea here is to begin communication and document coordination within grants network. This establishes really a cadence for subrecipient subsequent monitoring reviews to come, and ensures subrecipients know what to expect within each monitoring engagement. And with that, I'll pass it over to Sergio and Angie to review questions for the Q&A portion of our training. Sergio?
Thank you, Jared. I'll now read questions from the chat that we have available. You can please, if you have any questions, please go ahead and enter them in the chat and we'll read them out and get them answered. Okay, so first question I have here is, hey, Randall, is that plan the same for DR and mitigation projects? Randall, if you can take that question.
Okay, I will.
Sergio, as I understand the question in the chat, it relates to the scope of the monitoring. And as Patty indicated, the subrecipient risk assessment has identified the risk levels presented by the implementation of the disaster recovery program. The first program activity that has been launched in recent years is multifamily housing, the MHP program. And as such, the risk assessment did identify that subrecipients that are farthest along in implementing that first program to launch have incurred costs and therefore presented a more significant risk than other programs and subrecipients that have not implemented that part of the program. Consequently, the scope of the monitoring that is identified in the monitoring schedule follows the money. And we'll be describing in day 2 the focus on financial management and those subrecipients that have particularly implemented the MHP program to the extent that there is a pattern of actions established according to the HCD guidelines, and consequently information sufficient to test compliance against that early performance and offer guidance in respect to how well the subrecipient is helping manage the risk by addressing compliance issues under the initial launch of the recovery program. So there will not be quarterly monitoring of each subrecipient, but there will be an update to that monitoring schedule that reflects perhaps new information. We have tracked, for example, the spending reports and determined what I referenced earlier as evidence that certain subrecipients are farther along in expending DR funds toward the MHP program. And as such, we will be notifying subrecipients that will undergo monitoring in the latter part of the summer and fall as a consequence of that subrecipient risk assessment and the quarterly updates to the so-called monitoring schedule. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Randall. The next question here is from Mary Ann. I've reviewed the CDBG DR monitoring plan on your website. There are no exhibits as referenced throughout the document. When/where will those be made available? I'll pass that off to Samina if she could take that question.
Thank you, Sergio. The exhibits we will, I think we'll just discuss with the leadership whether we post the exhibits on the webpage. But as far as the exhibits, if there's a need for exhibit, please reach out to us. We will happy to provide the exhibit to you via email. But that's still in a determination whether to post the exhibit on a DR webpage or not.
Thank you, Samina. Next question we have here is from Jose Morales. It says, do you need special authorization to create an account in Grants Network? If Jay's still available, if he could answer that question, take that question.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that one more time? Do you need special authorization to create an account in Grants Network? No. So the individuals that were associated with the award are the ones that have access to the portal account. However, if they need to add team members, they can do that as well. Let me pull the screen up really quickly so I can show you how that can be done. So pulling that up right now. All right. So if you're in your award, and this is the one that we were just using earlier, you'll have the ability to manage your project team. So if you come to this action item right here, click on Manage Project Team, it's going to pull you over to your project team dashboard, and then you're just going to utilize this big green button that says Add Team Member. So you're going to do two things. One, you'll add their email address, and then two, you'll want to check off receive notifications for this award. That way, all of your team members can receive all pertinent information for this award. Once you've established these two data points, you'll click Add Member. And then down here on your invitation emails, you'll be able to see all the individuals that you added, their current status, and whenever they accepted as well. And then if you need to resend, delete, or remove the award notifications, you have all three of those options available under your actions items as well. So with that, I'll go ahead and stop sharing and push this back over to you, Sergio.
All right, thank you, Jay. Okay, we have a question from Mark. It says, hi, Sergio, is there a way one of my fellow staff can join now? She did not register, so was not able to join meeting earlier. If you send, probably not now as we're about to wrap up currently, but if you send an email to the disaster recovery mailbox, I can get them added to the Zoom link for the next meeting. And we will be sending out the slides, and recordings will be coming up. Okay, hope that answered your question, Mark. Deborah, will the team members receive emails informing them of tasks that need attention? Who would like to take that question?
Sergio, that might be another question for Jay. Jay, if you're still on the line.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. So if you check off that item for them to receive notification, all team members will receive emails on the tasks that are sent to from HCD to you all. So yes, team members will receive that. If you do not check off that item, they will not receive email notifications.
Perfect. Thank you, Jay. Are there any other questions?
Sergio, this is Randall. I can add a clarification to one of the answers provided earlier. Obviously, there's interest on the part of representatives from the jurisdictions whose programs have reached the point where they anticipate that they may undergo monitoring in the next several months. And we will urge you to participate in day 2 because of the additional information that will be shared on screen and then provided through the materials that Samina and you will identify that will be made available. The question particularly about the monitoring plan, I did place in the chat a link to the HCD monitoring plan, and there will be other resources identified later on. In day 2, we will actually be sharing on screen the monitoring checklists that will relate to the first topic of monitoring, and will be illustrating a wide variety of templates that are going to be used for those elements that Patty went over in regard to the monitoring process, such as the monitoring report, the letter and the report form itself, as well as more routine communications such as the notification packet. Those are actually part of the exhibits that were that Samina was asked about. And while the leadership is not yet determined to post all of those exhibits, in as much as we are wanting to test them out over the course of the first set of monitoring engagements, we are wanting to use the checklists that will be previewed for you tomorrow during day 2 of this 2-part or 2-day webinar delivery.
Thank you, Randall. So the next question I have here is from Katrina, and she asked, are task emails sent out once or reminders upcoming deadlines sent out? I believe that would be in regards to Grants Network, and that would be for Jay.
So it's kind of a combination answer. I don't know how. So whenever a miscellaneous task is initially sent out by HCD, there will be a reminder. There will be a notification that will go out. I am checking right now to see if there is the ability for them to also add a reminder to that. So give me 1 second. Yes. So whenever HCD does send out the miscellaneous task, they have the ability to say the due date is this date. And then they also have the ability to add a reminder date to that as well. So you'll receive those two notifications whenever the miscellaneous task is first created. So you'll be able to see when the due date is on your portal account, and you'll also be able to see that reminder date. So you will receive notifications, but it would be up to HCD if they were to send additional notifications of those due dates. And that I cannot answer that, but you will receive notifications. You'll also see the due dates on your portal account. So you should be aware of these items. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Jay. Okay, I don't see any additional questions. Are there any more questions? Okay, anyone want to piggyback off anything, any questions that were answered so far?
Sergio, real quick, I think maybe to Randall's explanation, and I think Tracy, you had a specific question, Tracy Davis, towards the beginning about access to systems. There is certainly a piece to this, I think, as we talk through tomorrow, that will talk about coordination of having readily available documentation, kind of split right in between some of that pre-monitoring reviews, some of that pre-monitoring communication that will really be captured a lot in those miscellaneous tasks. And then there's kind of a little bit of a shift if you're talking about on-site monitoring during the week, right? Where you're going to have HCD staff on site, possibly, and looking at records during that week. Certainly, the idea here is to still use Grants Network and those tasks to possibly share documentation, but there is certain elements of document collection or document sharing, which, you know, on your end, it might make more sense as the subrecipient to have access to a certain portion of your system as the subrecipient. So there's certain elements like that that I think we explore a little bit more in day 2 that certainly if you're able to make, or, you know, able to watch the recording after the fact, those are certainly things that I think as more and more monitoring reviews occur in the coming year, the end of this year, that you'll want to communicate with HCD in terms of that, you know, whatever works maybe best for you in providing documentation for review.
And Sergio, this is Randall again. I have now looked at the specific question that Michelle raised in regard to the monitoring plan, and I can perhaps more directly answer it. She had asked, is that plan, the monitoring plan, the same for DR and MIT projects? And the answer is yes. The plan itself is intended to cover the entire disaster recovery program. And as such, it will, like the monitoring schedules, be amended over time. What you see on the HCD website is the first version, but there will be others, and they necessarily will be refined as the focus of the monitoring moves to different program activities and different types of related grants, such as MIT. We could expect, for example, in 2023, that an amended version of the plan would focus more completely on MIT projects than it has with the MHP program, and to a lesser extent, the infrastructure projects in mind. So it is a dynamic document that will adapt as the state of California and HCD implement disaster recovery over the coming years.
Okay, thank you, Randall. Appreciate that clarification. Is there any additional questions? Just give it a moment here, give you guys a chance. Okay, so any additional questions? Afterwards, we'll add to the FAQ, which will be posted later. So thank you all for your participation in the questions. And now we're going to go ahead and look ahead to day 2, the overview. We're going to go over compliance records, grant program records with project-specific records, financial management monitoring, common findings, and we're going to be doing monitoring preparation and best practices. Now, I want to thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. We all really appreciate it. You guys' patience and questions and sitting here and learning with us. You guys have a great rest of your day, and I hope to see you tomorrow, same time. Same Zoom link should work. So thank you very much.